Hey everyone, welcome back to our New Testament challenge. Today we're in Mark chapter 9, and here in this chapter there's lots of things happening. As we've talked about with the Gospel of Mark, you're constantly jumping through different things, and we see first the transfiguration of Jesus, being transfixed into heaven, that glimpse into heaven of him being God's son with the disciples there. And then we move on, and Jesus calls out a demon out of a boy who, what we know is having seizures. And then he continues to move on, and there's different things that we can look at. But today, I really want us to camp out in verse 33 through 37. I'm going to read it for you. It says, "They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, 'What were you arguing about on the way?' But they were silent, because on the way they had been arguing with one another about who was the greatest. Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, 'If anyone wants to be first, he must be last and servant of all.' He took a child, had him stand among them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, 'Whoever welcomes one little child such as this in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but him who sent me.'" And so we see this Jesus really calling out the disciples. And it's interesting because the disciples, we have to remember, while they were walking with Jesus, they're humans just like we are. And in that, they had their own sin. They had their own fleshly desires. And for whatever reason, on this journey to where they were going, the disciples were arguing about who is the greatest among them, who was the greatest disciple. As we like to do. Humans like to feel like they're important, they're on top. And we see here the disciples are arguing the same thing. But then we see, Jesus call them out. And I think it's funny that, Mark tells us that they were silent about when Jesus asked them, "Well, what were you arguing about?" Well, Jesus knew good and well what they were arguing about. He was just asking them to make a point. And then he goes, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be last and servant of all." Now, in our minds, that's backwards. If you want to be first, you're at the front, you're whatever. But what Jesus tells us is, if you actually want to be first, you've got to be last. And so here, what we can take away from this passage of Scripture is that those who are in front, those who are the first, they may in fact be first to eat or first to get whatever. But this is the thing. Jesus, while those people may in fact be first, that's not what he's looking at. Jesus is looking at the servants, the one who is taking time away from what they're doing to then humble themselves and serve. That is what Jesus is looking at. That's what we as believers are called to do, is we are to be servants to one another. And so I know it's tempting to desire to be at the front of the line, to desire to have the best stuff, to be at the top. But the thing about being at the top, the thing about being first is, A, if you're first, then you're going to be done faster than everyone. But B, if you're at the top, then you're at the top of this world. And to be at the top of this world is only going to lead to death and destruction and hurt and pain. And so my desire for you, my hope for you, is that you will see in the Scripture that truly being last, humbling yourself as a servant, taking up time from doing what your desire is, and being a servant, Jesus, and doing what he has called you to do, is going to be far greater than being at the top of whatever your heart desires to be the best at. So my hope and prayer is that you today will humble yourself and serve others. So I hope you have a great day.